Chernobyl. Just the word is enough to evoke visions of nuclear holocaust. But for thousands of Australians, the nightmare was all too real.
She told us to just run.
They are the children of Chernobyl, scarred by their experiences, and now more than 30 years on, determined to confront the past.
I really want to go home, but I'm terrified. I really wonder what's going to happen when we get there.
For one Melbourne mum, this will be a journey of unexpected joy.
Da! She recognized me.
And unimaginable heartbreak.
This is my friend.
Is that how you remember her?
And that's her dad.
Back to a world still in the grip of nuclear devastation.
So is this dangerous? Should we be worried now?
Yeah,
A little?
Yeah.
I remember it as a very beautiful place to grow up. The people were lovely. I had a beautiful childhood, I can tell you that much. We look very carefree, don't we?
Ina Mittelman grew up in Belarus, in the shadow of Chernobyl. Now, 33 years later, she's happily settled in Melbourne with 2 children of her own, 3-month-old Gabriel and 11-year-old Mikey.
Our 65 years of life.
Yeah.
Her parents, Irina and Ilya, live close by.
It's your first year at school.
Memories.
Good ones or bad ones?
Just
memories.
Just memories.
Yeah.
For Irina and Ilya, life back then was hard but simple.
Ina and my younger daughter Rima.
For Ina, it was an idyllic childhood, with her best friend Natasha living in the apartment right next door.
We were pretty much inseparable. So our parents were very close friends. They were very close. They were like family. And we used to come into each other's houses without knocking. So my house was her house was my house.
Your apartments were right next door to each other.
Right next door to each other.
That was on the same day?
Yeah. It's a year before Chernobyl.
Chernobyl was 100 kilometers away. But on the 26th of April, 1986, that was much too close. The explosion in reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant would be the worst nuclear explosion in history. A safety test gone wrong, rupturing the reactor core and causing a fire that released vast clouds of radioactive contamination. But the Soviet authorities suppressed the true scale of the disaster. And only after 36 hours was the order given to evacuate the nearby city of Pripyat, home to the power plant workers and their families. A convoy of buses and cars streamed out of the city seeking safety.
Well, the first thing I remember is seeing new kids in our yard in the morning when we walked out to go to school. There were kids wrapped up in blankets.
Ina Mittelman was only 11 years old when the refugees from Pripyat arrived on her doorstep. But the memory is still vivid.
So they basically just got plucked out of their beds, wrapped up, put in a car. And their parents were washing the car, and our neighbors were telling them off, saying there are kids playing here, we don't need your dirt here. Yelling at people, just take your car away, don't wash it here, we don't need your dirt here.
So even then there was a sense that something was dangerous.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, there was definitely something scary going on.
As the fire continued to rage in the reactor, badly injured power plant workers and firemen were brought to the Pripyat hospital. Today, the hospital at Pripyat stands abandoned, like the rest of this once thriving city. At least 28 of the men brought here that day would die over the coming weeks and months, as radiation sickness slowly destroyed their bodies.
Standing here, you can just imagine the chaos of that night. Firefighters were brought in with horrific burns. There would have been mass panic. No one knew what was going on. But the nurses did know enough to take the clothes and the uniforms those firefighters were wearing and put them as far away as possible. And they brought them down here, down to the basement of the hospital. Now, this is as far as I can go because Those uniforms are still here behind a locked door, and they're so contaminated that door can never be opened.
Outside, the reactor was still burning, spewing out 400 times more radioactive material than the Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bombs combined.
When was the first time you heard of what happened at Chernobyl?
Well, it was printed in the Soviet newspaper, a small note like, 2 by 2 inches, like that big, about some accident.
That was all.
That was all.
But Sergei Murnyi soon learned the truth. He was the commander of a radiation reconnaissance unit. His job, to seek out the worst of the hot zones.
Tell me about the risks that you faced.
On the missions, several times I happened to measure where the intensity of irradiation was 1 million times background irradiation.
And still, the Soviet government downplayed what was happening, putting thousands of lives at risk.
The next day after it happened, I remember sitting outside with my friends, picking sorrel from the ground and eating it. It's pretty scary to think about it.
What precautions did you have to do? What were you told not to do? And
Try to stay indoor as much as possible.
Lock the windows, don't open windows. Wear hats outside, that's all.
a hat.
When we go outside, we have to wear hats.
That's going to protect you.
Still.
There has been a nuclear accident in the Soviet Union.
High levels of radiation.
The rest of the world found out what was happening soon enough, when radioactive particles were detected on workers at a nuclear power plant in Sweden, more than 1,000 kilometers away.
Next day, my sister called and said, it's a very dangerous situation, you need to leave now.
And take children away.
And take children away.
Because her sister lived in Australia, and it was announced in Australia that there was a disaster in Chernobyl. We were not told that it was a disaster, it was dangerous. So she called every day and told us, leave us fast as possible.
Ina's mum and dad immediately sent their daughters away. When the girls returned home more than a year later, the family began plotting its escape. They made it to Australia via remote Kazakhstan when Ina was 15.
Do you remember your first impressions of Australia?
Yes. First of all, I didn't want to go. When parents told me we're moving to Australia, I dug my heels in and said, you're leaving without me, I'm staying here. I had a boyfriend who I had to give up. I was planning on coming back to marry him. Thank God I didn't actually end up doing that.
So how glad are you that you got out?
Extraordinarily. Could not even begin to describe it. Like, thank heavens.
Ina is now a naturopath with a successful practice in Melbourne, but she hasn't escaped the curse of Chernobyl.
I've got thyroid nodules which were discovered when I was pregnant with my second child. The surgeon wanted to operate. He said, I've got 50% chance of developing thyroid cancer, so let's just get it out now.
Here's some Russian cakes.
My mum has had cancer 3 times already. She's had thyroid cancer, she's had kidney cancer, and she had skin cancer. Yeah, so she's been through a lot.
You'd think this family had experienced enough of the horror of Chernobyl to last a lifetime. But Ina wants to return to her homeland, to understand a tragic event from her past that still haunts her. Ina Mittelman is going home with her sons, 11-year-old Mikey and 3-month-old Gabriel, to the city she fled as a teenager, when the deadly fallout from the Chernobyl nuclear power plant explosion poisoned everything in its path.
I'm terrified. I'm terrified. There's a reason why we haven't been back. But you need to do this to confront it and deal with it and move on. Because the worst thing that ever happened to me probably was my best friend dying when I was 11. And I think having to deal with that freaks me out as well.
Within days of the accident at Chernobyl, Ina's parents sent their 2 daughters away to Moscow. Ina's childhood friend, Natasha, stayed. 1 year later, at the age of 10, she died from brain cancer.
Yeah, we were together, completely inseparable all the time. And I used to tell her stories. I used to tell her stories and she used to sit there and listen to me and believe every single word.
Tell me about when your friend got sick.
So we first found out that something was wrong with her when she became cross-eyed. They investigated, they found a brain tumor. They operated, but she died the next morning.
It took for us a long time just to admit that it's happened. And for Ina, I remember she was crying and crying and crying. Then she was shut down, you know, so didn't want to talk about that. And
For a long time.
For a long time.
This was my best friend. This was my, the person that I grew up with. And her death was completely, like it destroyed me. But I remember this place.
Remember this place?
I do. It's so run down. It's horrible.
Which was your place?
Third entrance from there.
That one there?
Yep. This used to be my kindergarten,
This place here?
and I think it still is. And if we keep walking this way, we'll hit my school. And this building is my house.
You remember it well, don't you?
It looks awful. It also looks much smaller than what I remember.
It's been 3 decades. If Chernobyl hadn't happened, would you still be living here? in the
It's
museum?
quite likely. It's most likely. I really don't know what it would be like living here still.
Belarus is one of the poorest countries in Europe. Once part of the Soviet Union, it's now Europe's last dictatorship. A regime that doesn't tolerate dissent. A place where strangers are viewed with suspicion. And memories endure.
Подожди, ты Инна.
Da.
Подожди. На 5-м этаже вы живете.
She recognized you.
She recognized me. She said, "Are you Ina?" She's gonna let us in.
Oh, fantastic. This is it.
This is it.
Ina wants to see the family's old apartment.
Nothing's
Wow.
changed.
At least it has a light. That light used to be broken all the time. And the sign, "No smoking," was here as well.
Just how I remember it.
Just how I remember it.
But new owners have just moved in.
It's the same freaking door. Oh my God, my heart is like pumping.
Someone's coming. Someone's coming.
Здравствуйте. Извините, пожалуйста, за вторжение. Они снимают.
Didn't like the camera.
I guess not. I think that was it.
I think that's it, yeah.
I think she like completely locked her.
She did, yeah.
Ina's childhood friend, Natasha, used to live in the apartment next door.
This is where Natasha used to live.
Yeah, so that was 43. You were 44.
I was 44.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was saying that between the walls you could knock
We could knock.
and send signals to each other.
Yeah, we did. That's incredible, isn't it?
What do you feel when you're back here at your front door?
Just, yeah, really emotional.
Natasha's family moved away after the death of their daughter. But Ina is determined to find them. And while she goes in search, we head into the exclusion zone. 2,500 square kilometers of contaminated territory, including Pripyat, the city built for the power station workers, now abandoned. Our guide on this day is 21-year-old Olga. whose family lived in Pripyat when the plant exploded.
So what does that mean?
It's a sign that we have already the dose that's above the norm of Ukraine, and we can even measure it.
0.73. So is this dangerous? Should we be worried now?
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit, yeah. This road, you have a permission to go as fast as possible here on this road.
33 years ago, this was the most dangerous spot on the planet. Waves of men, wearing only the most primitive of protection, sent to the burning roof of the reactor to remove radioactive debris. Each man allowed only a minute to scoop it up, then dash for cover.
We just found ourselves in a situation where, something should be done, and we were the only guys who were in a position to do it,
Pripyat was a brand new city, right next to the nuclear power plant. It was a jewel in the Soviet crown. With a thriving population of 50,000 people, emptied in the course of a single day. Residents forced to leave with only what they could carry.
Is this a wild dog here? A stray dog?
Yeah.
He lives here?
Yeah, lives here.
Now, these are the permanent residents.
So what do your parents tell you about what happened here?
My father was from here, and it's hard for him to handle it. During the conversation, he tried to stop crying.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
He cries when he talks to you about this?
Yeah, because it was from his childhood. For me, it's like, even right now, I feel like my heart, how to name it?
Your heart's beating fast?
Yeah, my
right
heart's
now.
beating fast. I feel the same that they felt that time, because all that they told me was sad.
Nothing prepares you for the sheer scale of what was lost here, or for the speed in which nature has reclaimed this once gleaming metropolis. But Pripyat is no longer a ghost city. Today, its abandoned buildings echo with the chatter of tour groups and Aussie accents.
What is it about Chernobyl that still fascinates people?
I don't know, I think it's just this whole kind of like ghost town thing where people just imagine themselves just getting, right, you're told you've just got to leave now, and it's just how it is, from 30 years ago. It's amazing, I think.
This HBO television drama has sparked an extraordinary wave of interest. Chernobyl, the series, is a gritty, often horrifying retelling of the events before and after the explosion, and a promotional bonanza for former liquidator Sergei Myrny, now Chernobyl's biggest tour operator.
We accept something like 140,000 tourists.
140,000, that's almost 400 a day.
Exactly. It's really a lot of people,
Sergei Myrny claims the areas open to tourists are all completely safe. The same dose of radiation you'd get on a flight between Sydney and Melbourne. The shattered reactor is now encased in a new safe containment building. And it is indeed possible to get very close.
Comparing to what I measured in 1986, the irradiation has decreased 1,000 times, and it's a huge achievement, And so I estimated the daily dose, and it was, not simply safe, it was miserable. It was like 1 hour flight.
But it's clear there are places within the zone, including those thronging with tourists, where radiation levels are still alarmingly high.
Now, this is a hospital entrance, the waiting area where the patients were first brought. And it's a time capsule of what happened that night, but it's an incredibly dangerous one, still 33 years later. And to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, this is a reception area, this is where the patients were brought. The paperwork is still here, and here's a bandage that was used on one of the patients that night. Now, this Geiger counter says I'm pretty safe standing where I am, but watch what happens when I put it closer to the bandage. 40 times the radiation.
Ina Mittelman has returned to the city her family fled 33 years ago, as fallout from the Chernobyl disaster poisoned the air and the forests. Ina's best friend, Natasha, died of brain cancer at the age of 10, a year after the accident.
I would go to the cemetery and sit on her grave every single day for about a year. I would go there, read my books. I would go there to talk to her. I just went there and sat there every day.
Grieving.
Yeah, just grieving, missing her, not knowing what to do with myself. How can I move on? I think I had some survivor's guilt as well, because she didn't go anywhere. She stayed when we left.
Do you think that contributed to what happened, that she stayed behind?
To me, it was connected. She was a perfectly healthy child.
Ina lost contact with Natasha's family when she left for Australia. But she's just heard that Natasha's mother, Tamara, is at the cemetery, tending to her daughter's grave, as she has every week for 32 years. When we arrive at the cemetery, an emotional Tamara throws herself at Ina.
Обниматься это всегда пожалуйста. Главное не раздавить.
We discover that Tamara's husband died just 4 months ago and is now buried beside their daughter.
This is my friend.
Is that how you remember her?
She was basically just like my sister. We met when she was 3 and I was 4. That haircut, she's always had that haircut. Like, ever since I can remember her, she's always had the same haircut.
It's a good likeness of her.
I think it's a photo.
Did you expect to be this emotional?
No, I didn't realize I'd be this emotional.
Was it important to show your son this as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I told him stories, but...
What's your mother told you about her friend?
Like how she was like best friends and they used to do everything together when they were younger, and how every single day they used to go into each other's houses and have fun and get always up to like some mischief, and how like amazing she was to her and how like they bonded together.
It's a long time ago, but those feelings are still strong, aren't they? They're powerful.
I did not expect them to be so... Yeah, I really didn't expect it.
For many new mothers here in Belarus, there's a profound fear that the effects of Chernobyl might be passed onto a second generation. At the local children's hospital, Chief Dr. Irina Kelmanovich has been treating Chernobyl survivors for more than 30 years. She has no doubt she is still seeing children suffering from the disaster. And unlike other doctors in this repressive regime, she's willing to risk saying it.
It's my opinion. It can be a result of Chernobyl because we have many patients, even in our hospital, children with tumor, different parts of body, tumor of brain, leukemia. So we have many patients.
Yeah. Hello, how are you? I'm Steve.
Steve, Katya.
Katya.
Out in the park, we meet one of Dr. Kalmanovich's patients,
Hello. Yeah.
5-year-old Anya, who has a brain tumor.
5 years old. 5, yeah. We saw a lot of the first generation of people affected by Chernobyl, but you believe there's a second generation now being affected by it.
Second generation, and my opinion, it's really a result of Chernobyl.
So you believe this is a legacy of Chernobyl?
Yeah, I believe.
Both of Ina's children, who were born in Australia, appear to be healthy. But her pregnancies were filled with dread.
You're counting the fingers and toes while you're having ultrasounds, but but you definitely, yeah, it's the sense of relief is overwhelming.
This is a chance to say the goodbye she was never able to as a child. To be grateful for the chance she was given for a new life in a new country. Far from the poison that has blighted the lives of her friends and neighbours.
If it wasn't for Chernobyl, I honestly doubt we would ever end up in Australia.
Chernobyl saved you in some way.
Australia is the best thing that ever happened to me. I've always appreciated immensely the amazing country that we live in. But now this is like quadrupled.